received for this request.
City Council meeting to order. If we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jackie, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Hewland.
Here.
Parker.
Present.
Dalby.
Here.
Schroeder.
Present.
Here. Richardson.
Present.
Mayor Erickson.
Present. All right, we'll move on to the public comment section of the meeting. If you are here and would like to make a public comment, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Points. All right, there's no public comment. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items that need to be pulled? Nope. All right, can I get a motion, a first and second motion to approve the consent agenda? So
Second.
I have one comment there if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you all saw the email from AP to us, a question I raised on the 48,580 deduct. AP, I don't know if he's here, but did a great job of outlining that, and obviously between he and Rick did a great job of reducing the cost. It's not a lot in the total cost of things, but 48,000. So
Absolutely. Team. All right. Any highlights, Andy, that you'd like to go over?
I think the main one that I'd like to point out, a couple of them, letter N, were the amendment to the city council schedules that we're going to be putting the study sessions ahead of the regular meeting. We'll have a drop dead end date and time for the study session to begin the meeting, and just to make it more convenient for the public to attend the study session and then the regular meeting. And then we have our civil service, we have our chief of police interviews coming up at the end of this week. This is being considered by the council tonight.
All right. Any other questions? Jackie, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Beach.
Aye.
Richardson.
aye.
Hewland.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Dalby.
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye. Right, we'll now move on. We have a presentation, YMCA annual presentation by Alicia Dismet.
Yes.
All right, perfect. I did get it right.
Thank you very much, and good evening. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you, Mayor Erickson and the city council members for having me each September to highlight some of the great accomplishments and progress that we're making at the YMCA, and in particular at the Indianola YMCA. I wanted to say hello to your new city manager. I have had a chance to meet him. He's not here tonight, but was very pleased, and we've had some great conversations, and I look forward to additional meetings with Mr. Reeves. While I'm always here to talk about the nuts and bolts of the YMCA and the dollars and cents, always let's not forget the mission work of the Y in this amazing community. We exist to provide opportunities to build healthy spirit, mind, and body for all people. Heather had put together a nice little summary of the year, and she just some quick facts about all of the things that have been happening down here in Indianola through the YMCA. And I was just, I was so happy to see everything, kind of contained in one area. And while she accurately highlighted a lot of the things that are happening in the community, it does fall short if we don't begin to think about the scope of the impact that all of these things that Heather and her staff do at the YMCA have on the community. measurable impacts, like on their physical and mental health of our members and residents of your community, whether it's chronic disease prevention, like diabetes or brain health, or whether it's just pickleball, providing a group sports activities for older adults that can really lessen the negative impact of social isolation in your community. The positive social emotional development in youth participating in the sports programs through the YMCA, finding new friends and increasing their confidence. Family fun nights at the Y that strengthen families. Volunteer opportunities that make residents feel part of something bigger than themselves. Giving back to support your neighbors. And more life-saving blood in the community as a result of a couple of blood drives that you've had this year, as well as drowning prevention in your community through swim lessons or safety around water trainings. And then, of course, just recently you had I think it was your second 9/11 remembrance, and what the impact that has on maybe some of your residents who lost loved ones in that terrible day, or those that want to remember. So this year has been a really positive year for not only the Indianola Y, but also for the progress of the association. And I just want to remind you and just review with you a little bit about how we make the YMCA in Indianola work. We have three major revenue categories that support the activities of the Indianola Y. Membership is 47% of our revenue and the largest portion of our revenue stream. The YMCA of Greater Des Moines is currently home to over 10,600 active membership units. Here in Indianola, your membership grew 24% last year, and you now have 1,440 active members in this community. And this meant a 17.5% growth in revenue from memberships over last year. So we're really pleased to see that and people coming back after the pandemic. A subset of that membership, as an association, our largest membership loss throughout the time of the pandemic was our family memberships. And we spent some intentional time and effort last year to see if we couldn't welcome back many of the families that we had lost. And in Indianola here, you saw 28% growth in your family memberships, or 173 families have returned now to the YMCA. And that's what I call strengthening families in your community. Other membership highlights from Indianola include a Remember the Y referral campaign that took place this year. And I want you to know that 10 out of the last 12 months, you've seen positive net unit growth in this community. And that's really excellent because when you run what may be considered to some as a fitness center, people come and go. We don't have contracts, and so they may stay for a few months, leave for a few months, come back again. So to have that kind of consistent growth over 10 months of the year is really fantastic. As a way to support that membership growth, the association purchased some advertising in your community. Hopefully you're hearing it on KNIA during broadcasts of the Indianola High School football games and your basketball broadcasts coming up this winter for both boys and girls sports. Also, the Y is the sponsor of the Raise the Roof moment. I hope you have a lot of those, which is a replay of a game highlight from the activities. And that's brought to you in this community by the YMCA. And then, of course, we have social media and Facebook ads that are geographically targeted to a 25-mile radius of Indianola. When the facility was constructed, there was great hope that it would pull from some of the more rural communities that even surround you. And so we're making efforts to get that word out. The other piece of the pie, in addition to membership, is our program revenues. That's 25% of the revenue pie. And Indianola increased by 10% over last year in Indianola when it comes to program revenue. One of the examples that I wanted to highlight tonight is the fall swim lessons that are coming up. Those lessons are full right now. Thanks to the hard work of the staff in getting the word out. We have not seen something like that for a very long time. To be able to say that our swim lessons are at capacity is really a wonderful accomplishment. And through drop-in special events and just special partnerships that have been developed over the last year, they're really worth celebrating. And I think that I want to pay special tribute to your advisory board that you have here in Indianola that really supports the Indianola YMCA. It's because of that advisory board that has reached out to other charitable organizations and your Parks and Rec department in the community that we're able to serve more residents. The third piece of our revenue then is our contributed income in grants. And that's the small, besides miscellaneous revenue, that's the smallest piece of the pie at 19% of our revenue comes from contributions and grants. The third largest piece within that contributions and grants part at 19% is the annual campaign, where as an association, we're challenged to raise over $1 million per year. I'm pleased to say that the community of Indianola had a $19,000 increase over last year, with a 30% increase in just the number of gifts that the Y in Indianola received. So that's just some excellent progress. Finally, just a few highlights of the other progress that we've made at the association level. Probably 3 years when I came before you for the very first time, I stood here and we talked about a pretty large long-term debt with the association. In fact, at that time, it was $28 million. I'm happy to report to you that that long-term debt has been decreased by 51% in the last 4 years. And that includes paying off the equipment loan that we had with People's Bank. And that saved $75,800 per year in debt service payments. So I am incredibly proud of that progress and standing here with you today. In addition to that, we currently have 80 days of unrestricted cash on hand, which is incredibly helpful as well. I want to take just a minute to call out your special volunteers and staff here at the Indianola Y. As I mentioned earlier, your advisory board has become a model for other YMCA branches because of the strong leadership that's been developed there, as well as the committee structure. We are very sorry to see Mike Bathke leave as the chair, as you can imagine, of the advisory board, but we're very happy to welcome Angie Jensen to the role of chair this year. So Angie will not only provide support to the Indianola branch, but I really look forward to her contributions as a voting member of the YMCA Board of Directors. So Angie will have all of the information from the association level and be able to share that here with your community. We also understand the importance of attracting and retaining excellent staff teams. So in March of this year, we invested in our staff with a $2 per hour across the board wage increase. And we have budgeted this year for performance-based wage increases in our fiscal year 23. We also were able to offer the staff here at the Indianola Y what we call summer refresh days, so that the hardworking full-time staff members have more flexibility in the summer months to actually take a little bit of time to refresh before the busy fall and winter season. So in closing, I just want to say that back to mission, that the Indianola Y is here to be a community-centered organization, bringing people of all ages and backgrounds together, making tremendous strides in ending our social isolation issues among seniors and teens in this community. And this Indianola Y is providing opportunities for everyone to learn, grow, and thrive in spirit, mind, and body. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the YMCA. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for all that information. We will move on to the next part, which is the mayor's report. The last few weeks have been kind of busy, but we're keeping up. We have been having a number of meetings. Gwen's been involved, Christine's been involved, Steve. I think everybody's been involved actually on homelessness. And we're talking about some ideas that we have to combat that here in our community. Mayor's Youth Council will begin their interviews for freshmen and one senior position this week. We have our fire open house, and I believe police will be there coming up in October German Ford is having a grand opening early October. I had an opportunity to speak at Simpson with an American government class about local government. They had some great ideas, and I don't think any of them want to be in local government because it doesn't pay very much. So they said they would rather work on the administration side. And then tomorrow we have the merchants group at 8:30 at Crimson Anchor. And lastly, congratulations to the Indianola School Board and the community on passing the high school bond with 85% approval rate. All right. We'll move on. I have a proclamation declaring September 24th as Tina Bush Day in the city of Indianola. Whereas Tina Bush has been a dedicated, long-standing servant and business owner to the residents of the city of Indianola. And whereas Tina and her husband Mike have owned and operated the Hideout at 204 East Clinton Avenue in Indianola, Iowa for over 10 years. And whereas Tina and her family and business have rendered service to our community through numerous potlucks, horseshoe tournaments, benefiting many Indianola families in their time of need. Whereas earlier this year, Tina was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And whereas Tina truly exemplifies courage, bravery, and a will to fight this battle. And as a community, we will continue to support and rally behind her. And whereas on behalf of the city of Indianola, the city council would like to recognize Tina for her legacy of caring and for the imprint she has upon our community. Now, therefore, Stephanie Erickson, Mayor of the City of Indianola, in recognition of the outstanding contributions of Tina Bush, do gladly hereby proclaim the 24th of September, 2022 as Tina Bush Day. And the City of Indianola, in witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and seal this 19th day of September, 2022. She has a benefit that they are having at the Warren County Fairgrounds this Saturday, which is the 24th, which was why that day was chosen, to help raise funds for her medical costs. And that goes from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Right. I need a first and second motion on a resolution directing acceptance of proposal to purchase $2,015,000 general obligation capital loan notes series 2022.
So moved as read. Second.
Thanks. Any
I think
discussion?
Mike Maloney's on Zoom. Mike, you there?
Yeah. Hi, folks. Michael Maloney here. I can be short and sweet for you. I think there are a few slides that were printed out for you. Thank you, Jackie, for providing that.
It looks like he's speaking.
Is he talking?
Yeah.
Oh, whoops.
Oh,
I'm
Can't hear
sorry.
you,
The
Mike.
last time I was on with the board, I was so loud. They were all buzzing their ears. So is that better?
Into his whole presentation.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've provided some slides for you that should be there. Oh, looks like no audio.
Technology is great when it works.
Oh, yeah.
Doug, can we move on and then come back to we have to withdraw that?
Yeah, since we're already got a motion and a second already, we better,
Withdraw it.
no, well,
Wait for him.
you can withdraw it and hold on, but we probably just wait for.
Yeah, hang on just a second.
Hey, Andy, how's that?
Pretty good. Yeah, we hear your mic.
There we go.
Hey, the important thing was Rick could hear me, so, you know, that was helpful, but, no, I'll be short and sweet, folks. I think you've got a handout in front of you there with most of the salient points. Overall, the bonds were priced this morning for final rates. While the packet said $2,015,000, we're going to actually come in a shade under $2 million at $1,990,000 for the par amount issued for the project. The true interest cost was 4.35%. This is really like the APR for your personal or commercial lending. That being said, the way municipal bonds are issued are with a single interest rate for each maturity year. So this is the best blended rate for you to understand on the project. I want to be clear on the tax status. This was non-bank qualified. You'll recall that earlier this calendar year, the city did a reissuance for the SRF sponsored project loan. And that benefit was a $1.7 million amount to the city for leveraging that program. So want to make sure that was clear of how this all tied in with some of the tax status. The city's AA2 rating was reaffirmed by Moody's, as we've talked about in the past. It's really maximizing the possible rating for the city based on your valuation and population. The last point I'll make here is the payments stretch out through June 1 of 2042 as a 20-year amortization. I want to be clear that that does tie to the city's debt policy because of the age of the infrastructure is actually going to be longer than that. So the size of the borrowing to line up with the future TIP revenues for repayment of these infrastructure and industrial park project were all contemplated in the planning and execution of this loan. The remaining slides I don't need to hit on. I've got a summary of debt capacity, which I've provided previously to the council. I also have a highlight on slide 4 in regard to just some overall thoughts here about the continued investment in infrastructure for the city. I think the council had echoed over the last few council meetings as this agenda item came up, the importance of this expansion in the Indianola Industrial Park. So I don't believe this is a surprise to anyone listening in today, but I think it's a great step for the city to be moving forward and opening up that additional expansion for future development growth of the city. The last piece that I would want to hit on for you is slide 5, just an overview on the rating. It's just something that I think is important to summarize each time because the city does do a very good job. I explained you're maximizing based on your valuation and population, but they've once again noted on the scorecard the factors that city staff can control are all maxed out at the AAA category, which I think is important. And while this report does look similar to reports from the last couple of years, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the average annual tax-based growth percentage has actually increased each time. So that 5-year number has inched up from 4% to 4.2% to over 5% annualized over the last 5 years. I think we all know that the city is growing, but with that being reflected from a national review, I think is very, very important to pass along. The last slide simply outlines the remaining timeline. Today locks in the rates and terms. Your remaining council action at the next council meeting finalizes all the loan paperwork, and then we'll close approximately 2 weeks later and provide funding for the city to execute the project on October 19th. Try to keep it short and sweet for everybody here today, but obviously happy to answer any additional questions. The purchase agreement that you have was reviewed by the folks at Allers and Cooney and is ready for approval. And then I'd finally like just to thank Jackie and Andy for all their time and effort. There's a lot of moving pieces behind the scenes with the rating process, as well as working with the attorneys on this to make this a particularly smooth process. And once again, city staff made that possible for the council here tonight. With that, any questions and we'll move forward.
All right, thanks, Mike.
That folks.
Councilmember Parker,
Aye.
Galbi,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
I need a first and second motion on a resolution approving a major site plan application for a car wash at 1807 North Jefferson Way.
Moved as read. Second.
Charlie.
Good evening. The location of this car wash, 1807 North Jefferson Way, is just north of where the existing commercial strip center is. Pizza Ranch is located there, a few other businesses. But if everybody's aware, there just is a vacant piece of ground just north of that they're looking to locate. Screen above, or the screen here will kind of just show the general site layout. The private access drive north is facing up that private access drive. To access that is just on the right side of the screen there. Wanted to point this out. I know we do have a residential area adjacent to this location here just to the west. And if you can see there, then on the left side of the screen, they're providing quite a bit of a landscaping buffer, which is required by code on that side. So we're kind of hoping that'll help buffer some of those uses. And again, when you have a commercial use against a residential use, that is a requirement of our code, and they do meet that. Just some elevations of what it'll look like. That more colorful picture there on the top left is the view from the front of the building, which is facing to the east out towards Jefferson Way. Those other ones will just kind of show what the general makeup of the building is in more of a black and white color, and there's a lot of detail on that, but I'm not going to go into that. Planning and Zoning Commission did review this site plan at their meeting last Tuesday. There was 4, we call them conditions. Most of them were clarifications. But first, that the primary elevation shall be updated to show that a minimum of the 20% clear glass fenestrations as required by code can be done. That was actually more of a clarification. So if I go back to this screen, right, let me go actually there. So that front face, our code does require that any front facing primary facade has 20% clear glass. With the type of business that the garage, or excuse me, that the car wash has here, they don't have any customer areas that are going to be accessing that. So they've essentially asked for a waiver from that code section. We did get a little bit of a clarification from them. We actually asked if they could put a more of a glass garage door in there as opposed to what they are having. And I'll just write really quick from the email read that they said doing anything different what they're doing, they're actually doing a roll-up garage door. Reasons for that is it's not physically effective based on the functionality of the business type and the car wash. The best door to be used in a wet environment is a coiling door due to the type of motor and limited areas for water to sit while the door is fully open. They further clarified that the door types do not allow for glass to be installed. The rolling doors do not. Those overhead doors will remain open the entire time the facility is open to the public from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. So the windows will not be visible during the day, even if they were on the garage door. And when the doors are closed after operational hours, the interior light is off and the purpose of glazing will not be effective. So some of their reasoning for asking for that waiver just with the business type that they have and just really the general logistical functionality that business has. Going back to the elevation should be updated to show that the stone veneer complies with section, I won't read the section, essentially what that says is the stone veneer has to wrap around the building. That was something admittedly staff missed on our review of it. Planning and Zoning Commission caught it, so we did get that updated and they are going to do that. That the exterior building finish materials on the primary facade, we just wanted clarification that it was a class 1 Portland cement based stucco. They did verify that. And then the last one was the roofing for the structure shall consist of the high quality metal panel system or other class 1 or 2 roofing material. And again, they did clarify that they do plan on using that. So really out of those conditions, the clarifications, really the first one is just that 20% clear glass penetration that I want to make sure we point out to the council that as part of the approval would be essentially a waiver from that requirement. So with that, I know there's a lot there, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I do have some questions. The rolling steel door they're talking about, are they looking at either stainless steel or anodized aluminum on that and then all the componentry as well because of the wet environment?
I would assume so. I know that they're on the Zoom call, so I don't know if that's working yet or not. I think they could clarify that, but I can get clarification from them if we don't have that ability. I know there's a chat there too. I think maybe Jackie can get them to clarify that point. But
and there are rolling steel doors that have fenestrations in them if that's a requirement. I mean, you can put glass or it has to be a 3-inch slab, but they can do that. So just that quiet. So it's going to be up most of the time, so I'm not sure anything.
I have a question, Charlie, on the grading. So I think if I remember right, that the hill kind of slopes to the west, right? So they're going to have to build that up.
Yep.
Dirt wise.
Yep.
How much are they going to have to build it up?
I'd have to look back at their grading plan on there. I don't know exactly how much that will be built up, but then if I also go down to the site plan and get back to it here. Too far. You'll see too, just with some of the grading they're doing, so that blue kind of L-shaped thing, that's their detention basin that they're also putting in there. So there's going to be some grading for that there around that as well. So really the site, I mean, and it does fall back that way, but you can imagine usually where the detention goes, the water is going to be flowing to that area. So it is going to kind of be essentially graded back down into that area, but they will get some flat area, obviously, for the operation of the business.
One last question now on that, and again, I'm getting down in the weeds here, but I mean, if they're gonna put a rolling steel door in that wet environment, they're gonna need an operator that's gonna be fully enclosed and watertight as well, and that's very expensive, but just an FYI for you folks.
Did they clarify anything?
No.
Are they a major chain?
I don't know how you define major. I
So
know.
they have other.
Yeah, they've got, I know actually that
They've
I looked that up. I think there's two other ones in Iowa currently right now. Burlington, I know has one, and I can't think of the other city. And then I do believe they're a little bit more prominent in the south and in the west as well. So one of the first one, I think it is the first one in the metro. I don't want to be quoted on that necessarily, but I know one of the first ones in the metro for sure.
My only concern again is that and the reason for this is aesthetically, if it's gonna be facing the highway and everything, that over a short period of time, what environment would cause that door to have a lot of cosmetic issues. And so I think that's something that we've got to be very cognizant of as we go through this process. And I'm kind of interested why they didn't do a high-speed roll-up type fabric door in that particular application. And then if they wanted something for more security, they could do something else with that too. But those are my concerns. So if they need to address those somewhere along the line, or if you folks want to make sure that you stay on top of that, that would be something.
Yeah, we'll ask for some clarification. I can update the council at a later date just because I know the Zoom isn't working. And that's something we can also just double check with them in the building permit process too. So,
okay.
Right. Jackie?
Councilmember Dolly,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
If you would just stay on top of that, because I think that's a big issue.
Great. I need a first and second motion on a resolution approving a major site plan application for a bank at 1401 North Jefferson Way.
So moved as read.
Second.
Discussion.
yeah, so this one, 1401 North Jefferson Way is for True Bank. I think the council is aware they were affected by a structure fire some time ago here, and they did submit a site plan here to get this location rebuilt. So what you're seeing on the left side of the screen there is just kind of what the elevation will look like. The main door there that you can see is kind of facing more towards the northeast as it comes in off of Valley Place there, right? That road that comes in up there just by where Iowa Realty and everybody is. And then the site plan, you can see for the most part, just kind of reusing a lot of the existing infrastructure that's in there, parking lot, stormwater utility that was underground. We did review that just to make sure that the existing stormwater utility that was in the ground was going to operate as it should with modern day standards. I think there, for the most part, that question was answered. It is going to do that. There is some concern with the larger rainer event, or I should say bigger rainer events, but for the most part, I think we'll be okay on it based off the review that we did, and the applicant, the property owner, is aware of those concerns that the city had. But again, just trying to make the existing site work. We think we're in a good spot with this one. So any questions on it, be happy to answer them.
Of the look.
Yeah.
Very nice. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak?
We'll be glad to answer any questions you may have on this project, but we are very anxious to get moving on this.
Absolutely. We are for you too.
Get
So,
our people back, yes.
all right, with that then, Jackie?
Councilmember Dolly,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Go forth and build.
You're ready to go. And it's a beautiful building. It'll be really nice. All right, we will move on to the Assistant City Manager report. Andy's filling in while Ben is up. I see it. What is it?
ICMA.
Conference. So,
Yep. Mayor and council, just have a few things just to note this evening. We did have our new IT director, Jason Holder, started today. He wasn't able to join us tonight, but I know Ben's eager to introduce him to the mayor and council and likely do that next time, the next council meeting. Like I said, our department heads and stakeholders will be doing interviews for the police chief on Thursday. October 1st is the Hometown Pride bike ride. And the log cabin days is September 24th, and homecoming parade is on September 29th. A few things coming up. Plus, we got all our other stuff.
The only thing I would add to that is, I think Ben had talked about one time about somewhere along the line, city council looking at members or a float or something along that line. I do think we've got a lot of activities, a lot of parades in the community, and maybe that's something we really want to consider down the road, but probably too late for this one, so.
Never too late
Never too late.
for a little spray painting napkins and chickenware.
Ah,
Another topic too that we need to keep in mind is we have trunk or treat at the library. So Mayor's Youth Council would like to challenge us and then see who wins. Now, there's no really prize, but they want to see who has the better trunk or treat. So gotta start putting our minds together what we want to do.
that's the
That's
31st.
31st.
Yeah.
Yes, October 31st.
Okay. I had it on my calendar.
And that
anything
is,
else?
that's in the parking lot of the library, is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else then?
I move adjournment.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So we have study session that begins at 7 p.m. We did publish that time.
We can go earlier, can't we?
Yeah,
you can go.
We'll
Yeah, I was saying, 'cause that's not a.
Perfect. We will take a 5-minute break and then come back and do study session. Well, some people probably won't be here until 7. If we take a 5-minute break. Hopefully they're punctual. North Sixth Street and East Yard Avenue subplan or sub-area plan updates. Right.
Here, so,
Could you tell us your name and what company you're with?
yeah, my name's Sean O'Shea. I'm with MSA Professional Services. I'm the project manager on the sub-area plan. Our committee just met the 30th of August, so we had some comments there. We had 4 concepts at that time. We whittled it down to 2. We wanted to present that to you all tonight. So you can see those concepts. Then there'll be a public meeting on October 6th. We'll be sending a postcard out soon for that for basically people around the neighborhood there that live in that area. So that they can come out and see what the concepts are, give us their feedback. We'll probably have another working group session after that to get together and talk about what we heard, any changes that we make from that. Then we'll do a little bit of work the month after, and then I'll be coming back to you guys probably towards the end of the year to have that for comments and hopefully adoption. We're hoping to get this adopted and have it so that it's ready to go come 23. So if anything does happen out in that area, you'll have a plan and something that's been vetted to that point and a vision out there. So when you start to get development interest and those kinds of things start to happen, you can go have them come to the table and say, that's a really great idea for development. This would fit really great right here. And this is kind of what we heard. So just to give you kind of a rundown of the timeline. Project boundary is along Jefferson, Iowa, Euclid, and then it kind of meanders through, I think that's 8th Street there, it's hard to read. So a little bit of data that we picked up. So national trends right now, income's increasing about 30% for the last 60 years, is these national trends are based on the 60-year time frame. So incomes have increased, and some of that's really due to having 2 income families versus 1 income family. 60 years ago, you saw a lot more prevalent. So that's really kind of a high number. That's not even really representative of what's true for an individual's income. Rents have gone up 70%, and housing prices have gone up 120. And that's probably even more today in today's environment, as we've seen. So multifamily housing right now, 23% is what we saw in 2017. That's from your comprehensive plan. That represented about 1,161 units by 2040, additional to what you have right now. We track that to today, and we're actually at 28, so that's bumped up 5%. We're going to see that continue to step up, I think, as we go forward. Just my personal conversations with developers to hit those lower end price points for housing. The single unattached home is really unattainable for a lot of people right now, just because of the way the industry is with the costs of materials and just labor shortages and all the things that are exacerbating that problem. So multifamily, I think we're going to see the need for those units. 1,414 units is kind of what we're estimating by 2040. So getting a start on that today is kind of the idea. The area that we're talking about in the sub area could potentially be a good fit for new multifamily units, which is why we're bringing this data to you today. You guys have grown from 2020 to 2022 at a pretty steady rate. I mean, considering that was over COVID, you still got a pretty healthy growth rate of a little over half percentage point in those 2 years. So volatile years, you're still moving forward and continuing to grow, which is fantastic. So, and there's some real upside or some real opportunities in the commercial demand as well. Your supply versus the demand. You're getting a lot of leakage that are going out into other communities for fine dining establishments, retail space, and those kinds of things that could be brought into the community, spend your money here instead of going out to Des Moines and other areas that are surrounding. So also bringing this data to you because there are good fits for potentially new commercial, new food and drink establishments and those kinds of things. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, because we're so close to the trails, a lot of it is kind of a bicycle-oriented idea, or catering to bikers, catering to kind of younger demographic. So that's the thought with some of the concepts that we have. So we've got 2 names for the concepts. These are subject to change. These are just names that we picked out. But the 2 towers concept is basically the co-op the grain elevators that are there either continue to exist in its presence or it still continues to function. Charlie and I have a meeting with the co-op next Monday to talk to them about their future plans. Charlie worked really hard and was able to get a meeting with them, which is great. We just want to talk to them about, 20 years from now, are you looking at making big investments in this area? If so, then we know that the plan is not to transition away. If not, or if they're just kind of thinking, well, we're just going to see what happens, then maybe there is the opportunity to have the second concept that I'll show you. But this concept is the towers concept. So kind of playing off of that industrial edge. So having industrial art, industrial design elements, really kind of embracing that industrial piece, because no matter how much greenage or vegetation or buffer that you have, those towers are going to be noticeable in that neighborhood. And especially if it's functioning, it's going to have that industrial noise and the things that come with the light industrial piece that's there existing. Repurposing some of those structures. So this is, it's hard to see this image, but this is Madrid, Iowa. So they repurposed a kind of industrial building, turned it into outside bar, restaurant, and it caters to bikers right on the High Trestle Trail. And it is a phenomenal spot. If you're a biker, you know about this, you've probably been there, and it's always busy during bike season. So, kind of playing on those tones and playing off of, we're not trying to hide that it's industrial. We're trying to embrace that and make that really a unique and cool spot. And it just is what it is when you have that in the vicinity. With this concept, there's potentially a little bit lower price point, just because if it is functioning still as a co-op, you've got the noise and those kinds of things, where if you got a higher price point, you would probably live somewhere not necessarily in that, right next to that vicinity. But you still have the potential to do some really unique things, make kind of a village type of aspect, improvements to the trail from a green buffer standpoint and kind of soften the edge, but then be able to kind of play off of that industrial piece. So, we got like these bike storage stations that you come into town with your bike, you can store it, then you can go downtown, or you can go to a movie or whatever you want to do. You don't have to lug your bike with you. I know the city of Ankeny is looking at doing these kinds of stations because they're really playing off of that bicycle oriented piece and really putting some investment in the trail there. And your trail is going to connect to Des Moines here real soon. Is that happening this?
I think this next year, yeah,
Next year, yeah.
3 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic opportunity to get people to come here and go to Des Moines and back, and then people from Des Moines to come in and bike and really explore Indianola. And this is kind of going to be your entry point to that. It's right on the trail. And it gives you a real unique opportunity to do something that really entices people to come in and explore and see this really cool area that you can potentially do. And then an expanded green space around the park area. So Dayton Park that's there, really taking that and expanding it a little bit. The green or the orange that's here is kind of that industrial that's there today, and that, with this concept would be anticipated to stay. But then establishing some new commercial, and like we said, kind of have a bicycle oriented or a bicycle feel to it, or at least have some outdoor spaces that people that are on a bike can come and partake and do. There is multifamily concepts in here. So kind of where the city, county facilities are, if that potentially goes away, it opens up an opportunity to do some new residential there in the middle, expand this green space to kind of soften this industrial edge that's there. The second one we call is blue sky, and this is kind of your blank slate. That's if everything that's there today, basically that's industrial, is gone. We've got an established, unattached neighborhood that's just that's really connected to this, and then we've got a really good functioning commercial piece that's along Jefferson, and this would just be a blank slate to really connect that all together and really make a unique area for people to come enjoy. You can have also new residents, might be a different style residents, might be a little bit different price point where you're going to get more market rate or what the market will bear at that time. On-street parking. So in this concept, we did add additional on-street parking because you're going to have more residents in the area. You're going to have more commercial space that's available. So you're going to have more people in those commercial spaces. So we wanted to open up the on-street, not only for additional parking, but also as a passive traffic calming. There's potential to have vehicles moving through there pretty quickly. And when you have vehicles on the road, it just makes people feel like the road's really narrow and it makes them slow down. So it can work both ways with that on-street parking. more multifamily and new commercial opportunities. That would be, like I said, still bicycle oriented, but just a little bit more that you can do with it, where we can pull away from kind of that industrial edge, and you can make something that is very unique and that really can be whatever you want to make it at that point. I mean, like what Prairie Trail is in Ankeny, they've done something that was kind of a blank slate, and they've taken that to an nth degree to make a whole new downtown in that community. This is something that you can play off of your square and make a separate district that's a really unique district that can bring people into the square and have people come out of the square and go and interact in this area too. So it can really benefit both spaces and obviously benefit the community as a whole. And what that looks like is we've got, you know, some more residential that's up here, some more commercial opportunities. We've got this commercial space with the green in the middle. So that's kind of that community-esque type of space where it can be kind of a shared space between some of those commercial uses. You can do the same thing with residents. So we've seen pocket parks and those kinds of things where you've got a shared space in the middle, which can function as a really great way to kind of have that community get together space and get people to really get to know each other and really build a community there. So I flew through those pretty quick. That's a lot I know that I threw at you, but this is kind of in its infancy as well. I mean, like I said, last time was the end of August. We were at 4 concepts. Now we're down to 2. If we talk to the co-op, maybe that discussion changes some things. What we hear from the public on the 6th could potentially change some things as well. We will be meeting again for a 3rd time with our working group to bring back kind of everything that we've learned to that point and say, here's where we're at. What kinds of changes do we want to make? What do we like? What don't we like? And then bring it to you folks to say, here's kind of what we have for a final version. Do you have comments or edits that you want to make before we get to an approval standpoint? I just kind of would open it up to comments or questions if you have any at this time.
I think it's a really great idea. I had one question, Sean. So,
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about connecting maybe that area along with the downtown. Is there any thought of maybe some type of bridge or right over bridge? I mean, if we're talking biking, because I know North Jefferson Way can be pretty congested at times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so as far as we've gotten is actually the rerouting. So the trail here and the trail here, we've rerouted a little bit because of that. We haven't gotten to Jefferson, and we haven't really brought that up as an issue yet. But if we start talking about traffic or bike counts and pedestrian counts going more, because you've got also Simpson right over here as well. And there could potentially be a student population living here. It's something that definitely should be on the table. I mean, that's an expensive endeavor. When you talk about overpass or going underneath the road, either way, it's not a cheap method, but it's definitely something that would be viable if you've got enough people or enough flow that's going across there where we say, hey, that's a hazard or that's an issue. I think that's something that could definitely be on the table for discussion.
But we have the signalization right there. So
yeah,
the trail does go there to take you to the square. So I know what you're saying. I don't disagree with you there.
you know, I just know how popular bicycling is becoming. And
yeah.
if you build a district to cater to that type of environment, you know,
Okay.
you're gonna eventually have.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully you're gonna have a problem, you know?
Yeah, I think out of this, one piece out of this is going to be an implementation plan. And in that implementation plan, it's going to talk about marketing that the trail's connecting to Des Moines. I know you guys have gotten a start on that now. And then some of those other initiatives of, you know, do we need to look at this connection piece that goes across Jefferson and be establishing, okay, where do we say that the point of where we need to really make a change happens? You know, what is that level of pedestrians or, you know, a level of traffic that's crossing where that becomes a real pedestrian barrier? If you've got a few, because we've got it set up so you've got a lot of people that are kind of on this side of Jefferson with the thought of going towards Des Moines or getting on the trail here as kind of the trailhead or the starting point. But that's not to say that we don't, you know, we want people to go over to Simpson. We want people to go into the downtown square as well, because you guys have done a beautiful job with that. So yeah, I think that's something that in the implementation plan, we need to address that to say, we need to be thinking about this. We need to be doing some studies and seeing what other communities have done with kind of a similar issue, because it's, you know, across, it can be all over the board. You know, do you do a pedestrian bridge? Do you do signals that are, you know, a little bit more at more than what you have now than just a stoplight or something like that? Or do you do underpass, or do you connect over at a different spot where maybe it's not so busy or it's a better crossing? There's a lot of different things that you can do. So I think, yeah, that's a great point.
You
Think-
mentioned,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
you mentioned student housing. Are you in discussion with Simpson? Because currently they're primarily residential campus. They don't allow off-campus living. Is that?
We
something
haven't
you-
been in discussion with them, no. That's just my own thoughts as, being that you got a college town here. We had talked about it a little bit
Mhm.
at committee, but we haven't gotten really any farther than that.
Yeah, I mean, unless they change their approach, they're a residential campus with very few allowances to live on.
Well, even with it not being student related, I mean, and as a growing community, we got more and more families
Yeah.
coming
Still
that are
pretty young
looking
people,
for,
but it just wouldn't be student.
starter homes, rental property type stuff,
Or people that go to Simpson and graduate, fall in love with community and stay here, they gotta have that starter point.
That'd be
So
great.
whether it's student housing and maybe it's not with, I guess I didn't realize that was the case.
I just didn't want you to build your concept on that. because that
Yeah,
would be
no,
so
definitely
hard.
not. Yep. No, it's definitely built off of the numbers that we've seen and really in the comp plan, I mean, you guys are you're anticipating around 1,200 new units by 2040 of multifamily. This is pushing that a little bit farther and saying this is a great platform or a great place where you can jump off and really dive into that.
Have you
Start
guys
eating up that number.
spoken to any of, like, 'cause I know over in that area, there's like a house for sale and a lot next to it that has like a Morton building type
Mhm.
structure on it. Have you guys spoken with them at all to see if, like, when they're selling, if they're planning on?
No, and Misty is actually part of our working group, and she had talked about how one of the properties that are inside this area are going for sale and probably be sold before we even get this completed. So what's, are you, okay. Oh, all right. That was at the last working group. She said it was just going on the market, so maybe it's on the market now. The thought is things are gonna change over in hands from this time to, we're looking out 20 years. And what does that look like? It's hard to say. A lot of it's gonna be private development, private money, that's gonna push that. But what we're really trying to do as a group is right now establish a tone and a vision so that, when you get into those discussions, if you do have somebody that's selling a property, you can start contacting developers, and say, hey, we've got a really cool concept that we're doing. Here's a property that's for sale that we know of, you can help establish that and get that going based on what we're doing. But we haven't reached out to anybody because we're just still kind of in the infancy of this. I would say after that might be a good action step to talk to the developers, let them know what properties are for sale or potentially for sale in the future and what we're trying to do in this area. And I think that could be a big step forward to really start establishing it.
Back to Ron's point. Right now, it seems like there's a couple access points, main access points to Simpson. Most of the students use, I think, Euclid currently because of the fact that it goes into the housing units right directly. It goes into Presby and Barker. Thank you. And so I think that's going to have to be something we have to consider because I see every morning I see kids coming right up Euclid, go to the bike trail, go run. Early in the morning, I see bikers coming out. There's mostly the kids, that exercise and do things in the morning. That's the path they take. And it seems logical to maintain that. And I'm trying to figure out your path here with the bike trail and that concept right there because you're coming down 6th Street. Evidently, there's nothing. I mean, that's not a connecting point unless you reroute the entire bike trail there.
Right here.
Yeah. Right.
That would be,
that's-
if the co-op's gone and you kind of.
Right, that's if the
reorganize
co-op
some of
was
those.
gone
And
and
do we think the co-op is gonna
more,
be?
no,
No.
all this is, we've got the
Right.
count, what precipitated this was the county's leaving.
Right.
Okay, and then
Oh,
we need to be looking at future wise,
Exactly.
what we have big enough for what we need, what is
Yeah, I
our
just
streets
wondered
and
what
parks.
prompted this
Yeah,
discussion
that,
and what
because
they-
then
I
you've
wasn't
got
aware.
other properties and stuff, so it becomes, what do we do with this whole area if everything changes? And
Right.
that was something that the community development department said, hey, let's come up with something here and at least kind of maybe get a vision of what could be over the next 20 years.
Right, and I wasn't able to make that last meeting that you had too. A couple of issues too. Did we talk or find out about the helipad that's currently used? I see that's part of your system up here too. Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
I don't know if we talked to anybody about that. That's something we can talk about later, I guess.
Yeah.
But obviously what it does for the council, if we look at this long term, it means you're gonna have to relocate the street department. You're gonna have to, provide
Yeah,
possibly.
Yeah.
And we're gonna probably have to obviously get the property from Warren County and relocate our joint fuel facility too. Those are real key components there.
Yeah. 'cause one of
Charlie,
the-
have we gotten the soil samples back yet?
We have, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, you know, so.
Yeah.
And I think
It'll be a
brownfield on that one.
Yeah.
I'm not
And what-
sure what it says because it was going through AP, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen them yet, but he said that they were back. And
He said they were back and he said we'd probably be able to qualify for some grants. possibly.
Brownfields
Yeah,
potentially, yeah.
possibly, so.
And also part of this that I forgot to mention, sorry.
You're probably gonna take that.
Okay, well, there's a space needs assessment going on right now as well as part of this.
Right.
We're working with Martin Gardner Architects and they are spearheading that and working with AP's department to determine, what their space needs are now, what they're going to be into the future. Are they outgrowing the space? Is the space working for them now? And that's going to help determine, long-term, does the city stay here or does it not? For the intents and purposes of this vision, we're saying it's not, at least right now, because we're trying to make this really a unique opportunity for you,
Right.
because the trail comes through here, it's close to the downtown. It's got a functioning retail established along Jefferson. So there's just a lot going for it right now for us to say, at least some of this should be a blank slate, if not all of it, because we're looking out so far.
It should be.
Because what you gotta look at is that section of land industrial the best use for it inside of our growing
Yeah, I
community?
just didn't know this had
that's-
even been discussed. So
Yeah,
it completely caught me off guard.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. I had no idea.
So
Well, glad we're bringing you up to speed now, so.
That's why we're having this meeting, yeah.
the
Right.
question I've got, so you mentioned like all the joggers and stuff that have been using the trail out in that area. So I've noticed like where my office is located on 15th or 14th, sorry. There's constantly joggers up and down, like groups of, joggers,
Students, the kids,
students
yeah.
and kids. So I'm curious why they're using 14th Street instead of the actual.
Every time I
trails.
see him, I shake my head. I'm like, there's a trail right over there.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, is that just maybe something that we need to communicate maybe more with the school? I mean, the schools obviously know there's
Most of them are
trails,
Simpson-
right?
most of them are Simpson students.
My daughter.
Which way are they going?
She's a
They going
longest
both,
run
in and
away.
out.
She doesn't like to run.
I wonder
on
if they go up
trails.
to Hillcrest. and
As a
then bike.
female, it's a safety thing, I
Sure,
think,
yeah.
for
But
females.
groups, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's always
And I
like
don't
there's
want her on
some-
trails.
There's a reason why they say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I mean, they just,
It's kind of rural Iowa thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rural Iowa, you see people running or walking on the roads instead of sidewalks. It's just kind of.
Could you go back and show those bike pods again? Because
Yeah.
it's a really interesting concept. Did you say that Ankeny was
Yeah.
considering them?
Yep.
Because technically, they're
Maybe not
not,
that exact thing.
yeah, they're
the
not supposed to
concept.
ride their bikes like on our square.
Mm.
They have to walk them, but like,
Mhm.
so maybe this is an opportunity for us to look at too.
Yeah, I mean,
Down there.
I don't think, I think for a real avid biker, when you're talking like a $15,000 bike or something like that, you want something that's really got some safety to it, not just a bike rack that you put your bike on. So I think the thought is that you're looking at having some real avid bikers, because that's a little bit of a trek to go from Des Moines to here. That's not gonna be just the grab your 4-year-old nag and ride around along with you to go that distance. And that's kind of the thought behind that though, is that it gives you safety, security, and it allows people the opportunity to really stow it and leave it there for whatever amount of time that they want. So, yeah.
One of the things you'd mentioned, if you go back to one of the maps, doesn't make a difference between you go to there was, why don't you go back to go back to the overview,
Sorry.
there you go.
Down.
Piece of ground that currently is not owned by the elevator, that green space right there along 6th Street, right in there. It's about half of that. If you remember right, there's a separate lot right
Yep.
there.
Yep.
You talked one time about trailhead or something there or whatever. I mean, that was just something too. But if you look at that, folks, you've got a lot of space in there. You've got some spots, I think, up in the far right corner towards the triangle there that, I think you have that as multifamily in your current plan. Is that what? No, over towards the right. Keep going right. Keep going, that area right in there.
Yep.
That's the county owned and you have that as, you have multifamily.
Yep.
And I think the concept is great. I think long-term that we could create almost a separate little district there too.
Yeah.
But it's gonna have to be a lot of work in 20 years to get that done, especially with the elevators and everything else too.
Well, I mean, like I said, I think there's a big push to do multifamily right now. I mean, I've talked to some developers that have historically been single, unattached
Right.
homes. And now they're looking at doing higher density because that's the price point you need to get to that, between $250,000 and $200,000 for that real entry point. Where you can do condos and you can do that kind of concept or rent. So I think you'd have some developers that are out there looking for concepts like that because they're looking to get into. So if you get the concept together and you get some support, and we hear from the community that's surrounding here, I think kind of sky's the limit on what the potential is there. I mean, it could be a really unique district.
Very definitely.
Yeah, I love the concept, so
Yeah.
I applaud you and Charlie for all you guys'
Yeah,
hard work on that.
absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Thank you all.
Very unique.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, pretty neat. Very true.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good timing.
Perfect timing. All right, we will move on to our next section. Professor Polly, and his students are here today. I'll let him give a little, I guess, background on. This started, I believe, last year, maybe 2 years ago. Last year.
Well, the first project we worked on is a survey actually, and that was started right before COVID. And we're just finishing it now. We started work on this about a year ago or more. Trying to remember. So it's been a while. I think we started, yeah, it would have been last September. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm John Pauly, and I'm professor of philosophy and the director of interdisciplinary studies at Simpson. The research that we're presenting tonight actually grew out of a long project on agriculture in Iowa, specifically on herbicide-resistant weeds. We became engaged with the agricultural community and the agricultural system. Students really learned from that project, and they learned from both the academic side and the outreach side, particularly the community engagement. Our idea now actually is to create and continue research projects with the city of Indianola for the benefit of students, the college, and the community. And perhaps to become a model for how a liberal arts college and a city can partner. Hence our new project. We moved from an inquiry into how the new wastewater plant functions to some serious questions facing local, state, and national communities. I think you will see these are kind of leading environmental questions having to do with water quality specifically. Our projects will be interdisciplinary, as this is not just a fad or a trend in academia. When dealing with, for example, water quality issues, we are dealing with systems, the natural ecology, the human created ecology, and human political, economic, and social systems. At this point, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Professor of Biology, Swati Subramanian.
Hi, I'm Ashwati Subramanian. For those of you who don't know me, I've been in Indianola for 4 years, loving every minute of my interaction with the community and with the students. I'm going to introduce our students, not just because they've done a wonderful job on this project, but I'd like to emphasize that this is an extremely interdisciplinary team. I come from biology, John comes from philosophy. We have Brody, who's a major in philosophy, psychology, and a minor in history and education. We have Katie, who is a history and a biochemistry major. We have Mary, who's an environmental science major. Trinity, who's a philosophy plus Spanish major with a Latin American studies minor. We have Dayton, who's a biology and philosophy major. And we have Elijah, who's a criminal justice major with a minor in environmental science and history. So these are students who are extremely interested in not just their fields of study, but they would like to implement what they've studied for the greater common good. And so I'm not going to take too much time away from them because they're very excited about their future collaboration, potential future collaboration with the community. So you can present your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so we kind of started this project with like a framework. We needed some way to organize our ideas after being invited to look at the wastewater recovery facility. And kind of the three big ideas that we looked at while doing this project was water quality, which is kind of a global problem. But even in Iowa, with the amount of agricultural stuff we do, we are facing some issues with water quality. Water scarcity was the other one, which is also a global problem, but even in the United States, we're seeing a pretty big issue with that right now. Even just in the Southwest, with Lake Mead, for example, being at 25% of its usual 100% capacity. And when Rick introduced us to like kind of this collaboration, we were excited because we felt a lot of the innovations of this plant really aided and tackled a lot of those issues, including environmental sustainability as well, which is always a good thing to try to do to not add any new pollution stuff into the water and just ultimately like an easy way to kind of help the environment. And so we were really excited when we noticed that a lot of the innovations in this plant were pretty positive for these things.
So here's a breakdown of the differences between the old and the new facility. The original plant has been processing the city's waste for 44 years, but that's about 15 years more than it should have been. The infrastructure and equipment was outdated, and some of it wasn't even being used anymore. For example, the chlorination process had stopped working and was never fixed, so it was dumping water back into the Middle River without being disinfected. Along with outdated equipment, the old facility had an inadequate capacity for the city of Indianola. Its population is about 16,000, but the old facility was only made for about 12,000, or about 3 million gallons per day. That is roughly about 4,500 more residents than it should have been. With these concerns in mind, the city passed a budget for a brand new facility that has made many improvements. There's new infrastructure, new technology like UV disinfection, and a peak flow facility that increases the capacity if needed. Another great addition is the improved removal of nitrogen and phosphorus. Both of these elements are targeted in the Iowa Nutrient Strategy, which is a plan to reduce the amount of chemicals released into the water system. The new facility is expected to accommodate for a larger population of at least 20,000 students to keep up, or 20,000 residents to keep up with the population growth. And the structure is expected to last about 50 years, of course, keeping in mind that there will be occasional equipment updates to keep it running. Overall, these are massive improvements that we should all be really excited about. Okay, here is the new water plant. The old one was on Hoover Street, 1800 Hoover Street, but if you just go north from there on 50th and Grimes, this is where the new facility takes place. And throughout the presentation, we'll go through each of the systems. So first we'll start in the Headworks. We'll move over to grit removal, then to the oxidation disc, and just show you throughout the presentation how the facility works, what each of the components are, and just the overall system of it.
Okay, so when we began our project, we obviously want to know what we're going to be looking at in the water treatment plant, what they're going to be sort of treating for. And obviously that's going to be anything that you flush out of your home. So your drains and your showers, your sinks, anywhere where there's water in your home, that's going to the water treatment plant. So the issue that we've kind of encountered with that, as we've sort of wondered on our own, you know, what's going to be coming out of our homes, is that a lot of people don't recognize that they're putting so much gravel and dirt in their washing machines, or when they're cleaning their houses with rags and washing those off, that's all going into the drains as well. And that's on top of the grease and the bleach and the pharmaceuticals that we're flushing or just digesting and ending up in there naturally. So here we have just a picture of the path that, a house will take their water, their wastewater up to the water treatment plant. Requires a lot of maintenance because there's a lot of stuff in there. But, every city deals with this, every town deals with this, and this is just a thing that, we need to make more present in our community outreach, is to let our residents know about what they're flushing, help them be more aware about that kind of issue.
The first place that the wastewater reaches after leaving city limits is the Headworks. The Headworks act as some sort of sieve and are built like stairs. The way these work is it's a catchment style that catches debris such as toilet papers, biological solids, as well as items such as pads, tampons, flushable wipes, used diapers, and anything an unmonitored toddler or adult can flush down the drain. After all the debris is caught up on the sieves, it is transported and disposed of off property at the local landfill. One way we can help keep our pipes and our facility clean is just to monitor what we put down our drains and be wise of objects and things that we use around our house.
So after all of the bigger debris is removed in the Headworks, it's pumped up to the grit removal system, which is a pretty high-tech system that uses a cycle of washes and kind of sieves out the remaining bits and pieces like the sand, gravel, glass, coffee grounds, eggshells, bone fragments, stuff that goes in the kitchen disposal, like garbage disposal, or even just like in the winter when there's a bunch of sand on the roads and you're washing your boots off and tracking it in the house and then cleaning up. Just little pieces get in there. And the main purpose is to reduce the wear and tear on our systems, because it can really impact the kind of longevity of our plant to have some of those little things in there degrading some of the pipes and whatnot. The collected grit is then, as of now, bagged up and taken to the landfill. It's about $90 a month and only about $1,000 annually. The plant engineers did discuss ways to like reuse the grit, because with this system, it actually leaves it like pretty clean. But just because we're still a pretty small community, we're not making enough grit that makes it cost effective. There's not really too much we can do with it for right now. One cool thing about this plant though is that moving the water from the Headworks to the grit removal is the only place that uses energy to move the water. It's able to flow downhill throughout the rest of the plant, so it uses gravity. So that's awesome. One concern we did run into though, after consulting one of our consultants, is because the grit removal is so far from the Headworks, there is a concern that some of the grit could settle out in the pipes, but that'll just require like some routine maintenance and stuff that it's not too hard to work around that. So.
So we've now gotten the big stuff out and then the finer particles, but what's left over is still a pretty murky water. So then it goes into the oxidation ditch. In this area of the oxidation ditch, it is aerated by motors that put a lot of oxygen into the water. That allows for microbes to break down any remaining components in the water and allows it to settle out. And then something new in this plant that we didn't have before and not a lot of wastewater facilities don't have is a Antioxic Zone. It is covered, so there's no dissolved oxygen in there. So microbes have to use the oxygen that's bound to nitrate as their source of oxygen, which allows for denitrification that leads to nitrogen gas being released. Right now we're breathing 78% nitrogen gas. So really that's the best outcome for any nitrogen that gets in the system. And to back up, how do we get nitrogen in the water? Why are we talking about this? Urea is a major source of nitrogen getting into the waterways, but also detergents, any organic matter also has nitrogen. And the usual fate of it is to end up in our waterways as nitrate. But this plant has this biological nutrient removal strategy, which helps to reduce those nitrate levels.
So the next area it's going to go to the water and sludge mixture from the oxidation ditches is sent to clarifiers. And the clarifiers' main purpose is to take that mixture that is now removed of most of its biological components and settle out the most clean water to be further treated and removed in the process. So it sort of acts like an infinity pool, and there's like a skimming arm that oscillates in the middle, and as that arm moves around, clean water is agitated and pushed over the edge as the biosolids that are remaining and whatever other solids are settled at the bottom, and then that is sent to, part of it is sent to the biological part of it, is sent back to the oxidation ditches to further feed them, and then the rest of it is sent to solids processing where it's somewhat treated to be turned into sludge, or it is sludge at that point. In addition, at this first clarifying stage, phosphorus is removed to slow down the buildup of algae in the rest of the plant by adding ferric chloride prior to the secondary clarifying stage.
So the next step for the sludge after the clarifiers is the biosolid storage. The sludge can either get recycled back into the oxidation ditch because the microbes are beneficial for breakdown, or they can be stored here. The solids are separated from the liquids because they sink to the bottom of the tank. The liquid is drained and sent back through the plant to be treated, just leaving the solids. The solids are turned into a homogeneous solution and is then hauled off to be used as a fertilizer. You might be wondering, what are biosolids? Great question. Biosolids are just a fancy term for sludge. They are rich in nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur, which are known as macronutrients, as well as micronutrients like copper, zinc, calcium, magnesium, iron, boron, and manganese. The biosolids must meet the EPA's requirements for application as fertilizer on crops. If it is not spread on fields, it is sent away for disposal. When given these options, it seems obvious which one to use, and a press release from the city of Indianola agrees with us. One concern people have is the smell of the wastewater plant, but this is nothing to be concerned about. Most people would think that the biosolid storage tank would be the main source of the smell, but is actually kept to minimum because it is aerated. When something's aerated, oxygen is added. The sludge actually has an earthy smell that isn't bad. However, there are serious concerns that have arisen from spreading sludge on fields that we will discuss later in the presentation. There are good qualities about biosolids like nutrients, but there are far worse chemicals that cannot be separated in the process. Some of these sources of pollution are avoidable. However, others, such as pharmaceuticals, end up in the sewers through the natural process of consumption and digestion. While these are a cheaper alternative to use as fertilizer, it has possible detrimental results.
The UV disinfection system is actually the last interaction the water has with the wastewater treatment plant. The UV light stops pathogens from reproducing, and if pathogens can't reproduce, they are effectively killed within a matter of seconds. Some of these examples are E. coli, Salmonella, Yersinia. There are many others, but these are some of the main ones. UV disinfection is used in order to reduce transmission of disease when human interaction with the effluent water is probable. And the water from our wastewater treatment plant will end up in the Middle River. So human interaction with Middle River is pretty much guaranteed. So the UV disinfection step is pretty important. An unintended result of this step is actually that animals are also not exposed to the pathogens that are being killed in this step. But one big kind of not issue at all with the plant, it's just a very high maintenance step. One of our consultants actually mentioned having to clean it weekly, if not daily, just to keep those light bulbs clean. Because if you think about it, the water has to be entirely clear in order for the light to reach all of it. So if you have algae growing on the light bulbs or big chunks of debris left over from the rest of the plant, that's like effectively not letting the light reach all of the light or all of the water. So pathogens can kind of sneak through that stuff and then be introduced into our waterways. And the EPA is currently not regulating, or they don't have regulations in place to have it be used year round. So we'll actually only be using the UV disinfection between the months of March and November. The assumption there is that pathogens are, there are just less pathogens in the winter, but we also know that, especially from the past few winters, the temperature changes are not always like immediate. We're not guaranteed cold weather in November. So that is one of the kind of concerns, because if we're not treating for pathogens. Those are just being introduced into the river. So again, not an issue with our current plant because they're just following the EPA regulations, but definitely like a overarching kind of concern if you think about it.
Now that we've kind of gone through the whole plan, just imagine everything we talked about so far contained into a smaller room. That's what the peaceful facility is. It is allowing for 10 million more gallons per day to be fluctuated and treated with just a tiny room. This is the first one to be permitted with Iowa, so I guess yay for us. But there's main two purposes for this facility. One, with high levels of rainfall, as we kind of saw this weekend, it will be activated so that there's just an influx of water going through the plant. It has somewhere to go instead of flooding itself. The second part that it's also for is the possibility that grit removal does become sort of backed up or clogged. So this will be able to be a backup scenario and allow that to be flushed through and allow more water to then not be contaminated.
So that's basically it for the functioning of our plant, how our new plant works and how it's different from the old one. So these are sort of the ideas that our new project is really focusing on, as these are opportunities for innovation and future projects that would be implementable across the nation, across the world, really, as these are issues that are nationwide and global. So the first one, obviously, is nitrous oxide. It is a byproduct of any wastewater treatment plant. It is produced and it's more harmful than CO2. Alongside methane, our plant does a better job because of the way it's set up of producing less methane, but it still produces quite a bit of nitrous oxide, which needs to be either captured or treated in some way. Next, we have the forever chemicals, or PFASs. These are chemicals that are present in the biosolids that we talked about earlier, the sludge. And especially in Maine, they found recently that these chemicals don't break down with our standard methods and by our standard means. So there needs to be something more done to eliminate these chemicals before they're spread on our agricultural fields and before they enter our crops and things like that. Sort of following is the issue of pharmaceutical treatment. So we talked earlier about UV. UV is able to degrade some pharmaceuticals to an extent, but even when that degradation is possible, a degraded pharmaceutical is still active. It still has active pharmaceutical ingredients in it that can be combined later on and will still affect the natural life in the environment. Furthermore, sludge, as we talked about with the forever chemicals, that's an issue. But as well as just like what is generally in the sludge, the treatment of it, the regulation of sludge in the US is not super stringent. So there's a pretty wide variation of what can be in it just like across the US. So as I talked about in Maine, they've recently banned the use of biosolids on fields as or sludge biosolids from wastewater treatment plants as a replacement for agricultural fertilizer because of those forever chemicals mostly, but also because of just, the general lack of regulation on the issue. And finally, the issue of stormwater. Stormwater in Iowa, as well as in many states, is not regulated on a wide scale. It's not treated, but it does contribute massively to our environmental degradation. Many of our streams are polluted because of agricultural runoff that is a result of stormwater on fields and spreading that sludge or just spreading the antibiotics that are on farms immediately into the streams and the other water sources. So that is an issue that we would like to see some more combating. The DNR does do some stream assessments, but we would like to see that taken a bit more seriously as an issue of pollution.
So just to restate, these aren't necessarily things that are Indianola specific. They're just something that we found in the literature that are concerns nationwide. And one of the nationwide concerns is nitrous oxide. We see here that the EPA found that overall 75% of nitrous oxide emissions are from agriculture. And then us in Iowa, that percentage is a lot greater in agriculture. But the second greatest contributor is wastewater treatment at 6%, at least in 2020 across the United States. And so it's important to look at how our wastewater treatment plant that we're building is combating nitrous oxide. And actually we found that it does a pretty good job. So it has this oxidation ditch with these two zones that allows for biological nutrient removal, which is great when you have less we have a controlled nitrification and denitrification in the plant that allows for less nitrous oxide to be emitted as a byproduct. Not that we need to go into full detail of nitrogen cycle, but it goes from ammonium into nitrates, and then it's denitrified, and one of the intermediate steps is this nitrous oxide. So when you aren't having controlled denitrification or you don't have the right conditions, that's when nitrous oxide is produced. So this plant with controlled denitrification allows for less nitrous oxide to be produced. And also the monitoring pH is important. These microbes are sensitive to pH. In acidic conditions, they are less likely to complete the nitric oxide or nitrogen cycle and then produce nitrous oxide. So this plant actually has a couple of different management practices that reduce nitrous oxide emissions.
As we've talked about before, pharmaceuticals are becoming a bigger issue just with the sheer amount of them that are used that will eventually end up in the wastewater treatment plant. Just because of digestion, if you take them, you're gonna get rid of them. And they're called APIs, so active pharmaceutical ingredients. They're kind of what's left after it's been broken down. But they're an unregulated environmental contaminant found in all wastewater treatment facilities. Our consultant was actually able to test for them at their plant. And they did find that they were essentially swimming in pharmaceuticals there. But facilities are just not designed to treat them. They're not regulated or anything. So there's just no reason to treat them for now. But they're definitely an issue. Global medicine estimates that 4.5 trillion doses are consumed yearly. And that takes into account also the agricultural use of them for large scale farming. But if 4.5 trillion doses are being consumed, 4.5 trillion doses are also being excreted. There are 3,000 or more known pharmaceuticals found in the environment. Some of these examples are birth control, pain relievers, antibiotics, essentially anything that you end up taking will eventually end up at the wastewater treatment facility. We know that there are very large negative environmental effects of pharmaceuticals. Especially the active pharmaceutical ingredients that are just kind of left over. They're all interacting with each other, and we're still seeing some new negative effects as well. So at the moment, they're not regulated by the EPA, but that's certainly something to look forward to in the future if that technology becomes available, kind of updating the pharmaceutical treatment methods.
Another key issue is looking at the biosolids that are produced by the wastewater treatment plant and then applied as fertilizer on farmland. Annually, millions of tons of treated sewage biosolids are applied to farmland across the United States. What is left in it after the wastewater treatment process? It is 3 to 4% solids and then mostly water. And then among those solids is mostly organic matter. And also in it is nitrogen and phosphorus, which are important minerals, as you know, for farming. The EPA does require that 9 heavy metals are regulated as well as pathogens. However, there are 90,000 different man-made chemicals that we use daily that can end up in the wastewater treatment and then ultimately could end up in our sludge. Among those include heavy metals, flame retardants, pharmaceuticals, dioxins, plastics, other chemicals in organisms. And so it's important to continue to have the EPA look at if these chemicals are present in high levels in the sludge and also to potentially regulate these if they do become concerns. One chemical that we looked up as a group was the PFAs. They're also known as forever chemicals, and they have negative characteristics in the environment, and they're known as forever chemicals. So when we apply them to farmland, they stay there and potentially can end up in our waterways.
And this is a brief history of the sewage biosolid regulations. If you look first in 1972, Congress passed the Clean Water Act. This was essentially to combat hypoxia, air pollution from being dumped were burned in there. And then next in 2002, EPA released a 14 action plan. This allowed for more regulations and actions to be taken in place, as long with review of new chemicals that are found in biosolids, and just to have biannual reviews as well. But then in 2003, EPA did make the decision not to regulate any of these dioxins, which led to their 2018-19 biannual review, which they found 116 new chemicals within the biosolids, which they do pose a great threat, as we talked before, not to just ourselves, but also to the environment.
So as with all things that we've discussed, the issue of stormwater is not just an issue in Iowa, it's a national issue and a global issue. However, because of Iowa's place as somewhat of a breadbasket, we have a lot of agricultural land. We do see a lot more runoff here than maybe in other places, as it contributes to agriculture and the products made from it. So obviously all that runoff, both from agriculture and from the urban areas, is going to flow directly into storm drains, or it's going to flow directly into those water sources. And that water is going to include heavy metals, plastics, and other solids, chemicals and petrochemicals, so oil and gas from cars, pharmaceuticals, sand and grit from the streets or just from the fields, bacteria, and the forever chemicals that we've mentioned. So all of these things are going to be in a higher presence in stormwater than in wastewater, obviously, including, or most primarily, the heavy metals, the chemicals, and the plastics, because of just the greater source from which they can come than just the drains in your homes. Unfortunately, there's no treatment of stormwater in most states, especially not in Iowa, or specifically not in Iowa, that we've found or been able to contact anyone about. The closest thing we have to assessment is the DNR does stream assessments, as well as some private efforts to assess the streams in the area. Because stormwater is a federally unregulated issue, there is not a whole lot of, or there's a lot of research on the issue, but there's not a whole lot of practical work being done. So the effects of stormwater and stormwater mitigation and those sorts of efforts are pretty under-researched at this point and have a lot of work to do. So we want to continue to work together with Simpson and the city in conjunction. And one of our first goals for that is to do some of those stream assessments ourselves. The DNR does do a little bit of the actual makeup assessments, but most of their things are checking for the banks and checking for runoff and things like that, degradation of like the physical structures of the natural waters. We would like to do a little bit of the water testing, as well as testing for some of the things in the sludge that's being spread on agricultural fields. That's still, a common practice here. Furthermore, as far as stormwater goes, we've seen some promising things. The DNR gave the city a grant when we were rebuilding the square to add some more absorptive materials and allow the stormwater to drain faster and to be treated before being returned to the natural waters. Not fully treated, it's like a natural treatment process. But it's been something that other states have tried, as well as doing sort of a more natural treatment process to sort of filter out the more heavy effects that we see going down the storm drains that are present in the streets. And finally, we'd like to present this information to a wider population of the city. We would like to work with the city to inform them about what they're flushing, to be more responsible with what chemicals they're using in their toilets, and just to let them know about these issues of water treatment and water quality and water scarcity, as they affect them as much as they affect us.
I want to thank, first of all, Rick Graves, who's the supervisor of the new facility, was always incredibly helpful, gave us tours, lots of information. Stephanie has been helpful. We want to thank you, the City Council, the Indianola Sustainability Committee. We presented to them previously. I want to thank Simpson College and also some of our consultants. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great information, actually. I wish I had that before we went on our tour of the wastewater treatment plant. because I only understood about every other word that the consultants were giving us. But that was really good. I wrote it down in steps,
Can
so.
we ask a question or two? Question I'd have for you folks. Sludge versus farm chemicals, what's your thoughts?
Versus what?
Well, so let's say, for instance, a farmer chooses to use sludge as a fertilizer rather than typical farm chemicals. Which one would be better?
So right now, the issue with sludge is that because there's not like federal regulation, as far as we know, on the actual makeup of it and the final assessment, our plant does do assessments on it before it's sent out. But the issue is a federal one, as in Maine, because of the forever chemicals and your ability to break them down right now, it's a bit unadvisable to use them on a wide scale. We understand that, especially in the commercial farming sector, it is a massive profit saving tool because it's a byproduct of wastewater. So obviously, in some cases, these farmers might get it for free. But we think that the healthier option for the lifespan of the field that they're going to be farming is to, for right now, avoid biosolids as much as possible because of the presence of forever chemicals, and use other options.
So even though the chemicals maybe have carcinogens and other things that could run off into our water system, is that still better than sludge? I guess I'm just asking questions.
Ultimately, we aren't really sure what's even in the sludge. Like, there's no tests done to test for exactly what chemicals are in there. So I don't think really either of those are options, but but like, at least in our current, like there's an equal opportunity for carcinogen containing chemicals or whatever to be present in the sludge as well. We just don't know what those
Right.
are.
One thing, there are, I mean, the research on this, there's, for example, dioxins that have been found in sludge. There are carcinogens that have been found in biosolid, not just the forever chemical.
Right. So the real thing is going to be if you folks start doing stream assessments. Middle River would be a good example. Do an assessment on Middle River and then do an assessment on what this new plant will put into Middle River. I think you'll find a pretty interesting result, to be frank about it. But
yeah, we're excited to do stream assessments because we don't have any of that data right now as far as.
that's
our
what I'm saying. Is if you get into that, yeah, it'd be awesome
Yeah.
to take a look and see what the results of that would be.
Any of you grow up in farms?
I did for about 8 years.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, really interesting. You bet.
And I know Rick's on the phone. Rick, did you have anything to say?
He's on Zoom, so he's
He's on
not gonna be
Zoom.
about.
Okay.
Well, so we won't be able to hear him, so. But thank you guys. We really appreciate it. This is a
Yeah,
lot of work.
interesting,
I
very
know you guys worked hard. Work with it.
Yeah.
Very thorough.
Good job.
Good job, professors. Get some good public speakers there. Hey, can I take a picture of your guys' group? Thank you.